Hey guys, welcome back to The Bright Side. Macy here, The Bright Side Girl, and today we're going to be doing my January reading wrap up. So I read a total of 12 books, 9 on audio and 3 physically, and then I DNF'd 1 book. We're going to go in order of least favorite to favorite. I didn't have a huge diversity this month as far as star ratings goes, but we're going to talk about the book that I DNF'd first. Okay, so I DNF'd Undeath and Taxes. This is the second in the Fred the Vampire Accountant series. I read the first one last year during Not So Scary-a-thon, and I really enjoyed it. This is an adult urban fantasy following Fred, who kind of has a boring life as an accountant, and then he winds up becoming a vampire, and his life still kind of stays regular, but then some wild things happen. So it's a little bit of like a cozy fantasy. I really enjoyed the first one overall, and I was planning on reading the entire series. I had this on my unfinished series list, but there are 8 books in the series, and I was listening to the second book and I was enjoying it, but I just didn't really feel like I was in the mood for that type of book. So I decided to DNF it, maybe temporarily, and take it off of my unfinished series list. This one definitely has an older school writing about it, which I did enjoy. It has a lot of fantasy elements. It's got a lot of really fun characters. I feel like a lot of people are gonna love it. I don't want you to see this in a negative light at all, because I think it's just more my mood. And they're really, really quick, short little novellas. If you really enjoy like Dungeons and Dragons especially, I think you will really love this series. There are a lot of elements, I think, from the game that come into play in here. It seems like the author probably is a fan of Dungeons and Dragons. And I liked the element of Fred being like this kind of sweet cinnamon roll, kind of boring vampire. I just wasn't in the mood, so I DNF'd this one. But not every DNF is for a bad reason, so just kind of keep that in mind. Okay, I had no 1 stars, no 2 stars, which is pretty normal for me. And then everything else I read was pretty much a 3 to 4 star. I had a couple of 5-star graphic novels. These aren't necessarily going to be in like favorite to least favorite order, because a lot of them are around the same, but we're going to dive right in. One of my only like solid 3 stars was Father Christmas and Me by Matt Haig. This is again part of a series that I'm finishing. This is a middle grade Christmassy series, the first book being A Boy Called Christmas. I really loved the first book. It was like 5 stars for me. The second book was like 4 stars, and then this was like 3 stars. I didn't really feel like this one was necessary. It wasn't quite as festive. I feel like middle graders will still love this series as a whole. In this one, we're following a character from the second book, so while you don't have to read the first book in order to read the second book, I would recommend reading the second and the third in order, because they kind of follow right after each other. It also wasn't the holiday season anymore, so that could have affected my enjoyment. The narrator was really good. This just wound up being my least favorite in the series. Alright, next we're going to talk about the Illusionology. I gave this book 4 stars, but I gave the second book 3.5, 3.75. This is the only main book that I physically read for January, and I really, really enjoyed it. This cover is stunning. I've been wanting to get to it for a while. This is a young adult novel that is basically a virtual reality, almost dystopian type plot. So in this world, they have created this virtual reality world called Illusion that you can go into and have all these fantastic experiences. And our main character's dad is the creator of Illusion, but he winds up being in an accident and dying, and her best friend had worked with her dad on this project, and so he's kind of in charge of a lot of the overseeings of Illusion itself and like the new things coming, him and his mom and some other people, and she's kind of dealing with grief and the death of her father, struggling to go back into the world because of all the memories and everything, and then things kind of go awry from there. Things I really loved about this one, the virtual reality fast-paced tension elements were so good. I really loved it. If you like things like Warcross or Other Worlds, this one I feel like stood up pretty good to it. Things I didn't love, I did not enjoy the love triangle in here. There's a love triangle kind of. I felt like it was way over dramatic, and I felt like I didn't really like either of the love triangle characters as far as like a romantic interest. That part didn't interest me as much as the actual virtual reality world and the things that were happening. So I really enjoyed this overall. I did the second book via audio. The narrator was decent, not my favorite, but she was good because I didn't have a physical copy. And this is just like a quick read. Like I said, if you like those other types of books, I feel like you would really enjoy this one. Give this one 4 stars and the second one like 3.75. Next up is Falling Kingdoms. So this year I have a few friends and we are buddy reading Falling Kingdoms and Throne of Glass throughout the whole year. I'm very excited to finally get these done. We're gonna do 1 or 2 a month until we finish them. So we started with Falling Kingdoms because I was able to get this on audio right away. All I knew going in was that this was a really high fantasy beloved young adult series. That was it. So first up, I really enjoyed the narrator. He was fabulous. I really liked the writing. I thought it was really well done. This has major young adult Game of Thrones vibes. I've heard other people not liking that comparison because it's not written quite as well as Game of Thrones, but I still feel like it's very comparable. There are 3 kingdoms that we're following here. We've got some brutal situations and some intense characters. We're following kind of 4 main characters overall, and they're kind of getting caught in the web of the warring kingdoms. We've got a lot of different plot points going on. There are some really cool fantasy, like elemental magic elements, a little bit of love interest, but not much, and then some interesting side plots and evil kings and things like that. This definitely has like a more brutal tone. One of the characters I was not a big fan of, and there's like a little side plot that was kind of like messed up, but that kind of made it like more Game of Thrones like. My downfall for this one is I'm not sure that I'm enjoying any of the characters that much except for maybe one of them. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be, but I'm not very attached, so I am kind of mixed on whether I'm finishing the entire series, but I did enjoy the world overall. It's a quick-paced book, and it was like a 3.5 for me. Okay, then right after Christmas, I read The Family Game by Catherine Steadman. This is an adult wintry thriller mystery. This has such an interesting, wild premise to it. So in this one, we have our main character who is recently engaged, and she has to go and meet her fiance's family finally. He's kind of been keeping them like away from her. He comes from this extremely wealthy family. I believe they're in England. He is the oldest child and he has a lot of responsibilities on him. He's supposed to kind of marry like in his ranking, so he's worried about his family liking his fiance. And so there's kind of like this political family drama happening. But the family also plays like these weird games around Thanksgiving and Christmas. They do one that's kind of themed around Krampus, where you have to like go and find like a Yule twig to ward off Krampus, and there's like all these different games that they play, and they're kind of like almost like a hazing ritual, I feel like, for our main character. So it's really fast paced, and there's this mystery that starts to kind of unravel itself as we are getting to know the family, and our main character is kind of uncovering secrets, and she's also simultaneously writing a thriller novel herself and getting like ideas for it. So this one has a lot of mixed reviews because it's absolutely wild and completely unbelievable and unrealistic, which doesn't bother me because I kind of go into the books to just go for a wild good time. So for the most part, I don't need things to be like super believable. I personally just had such a great time with this one. Like, it kept me on the edge of my seat. I absolutely loved the narrator. She was absolutely fabulous. And there were just different elements. There were like tiny little sound effects in here. At one point, our character is listening to something on a tape and it has kind of like scratchy sounds. And I really liked that. It wasn't like overly distracting. And overall, like the ending was wild and crazy, but I just thought it was like really fun, and I just had like a great time. So it was kind of silly and unbelievable, but this was still like a 4-star read for me, and it has really good winter and Christmassy vibes. So if you're looking for something around the holiday season that's like a little darker and just slightly festive with some kind of Krampus elements as well, this one to your list. I personally thought it was great. If you are like a huge thriller reader and that's like the main thing that you read, you probably aren't gonna like this one, but I just had the best time with it. So it was like a 4-star for me. Next, we're gonna talk about Fourth Wing. I finally did it, you guys. I finally went to dragon school. I finally got to experience the hype. I somehow did not get spoiled on anything. So I did this one via audiobook because Rebecca Solar is the narrator. She is one of my favorite narrators of all time. She does all of Marissa Meyer, all of Stephanie Garber. I have heard mixed reviews from other people that they did not enjoy the audiobook experience. I'm not really sure why, because she does such a great job, except for like one part that I'll talk about in a second. So I will warn you, if you're not like a major audiobook lover, maybe physically read this one. There is also a graphic audio out, which I don't know if I'm a fan of graphic audios. I actually did the Fred the Vampire for graphic audio, and I just didn't like it. I felt like there were way too many sound effects, and like whenever they would be walking, they would sound like they're walking, and I found it very distracting. I actually love sound effects and things when they're done a certain way. Some of my favorite audiobooks do that. I've done 2 graphic audios now, and I haven't really liked either of them. So I am gonna try this via graphic audio again in the spring, and I'll let you guys know, but I'm not sure if I'm a graphic audio girl, which is so strange because I love audiobooks. For those of you that are not big audio people, it might be better to physically read this. Things I didn't like. We'll talk about those first. One, I was just so surprised that this was like the most hyped book of 2023. Now, books being hyped does not affect my enjoyment. I go into books expecting to enjoy them. I don't want to go in purposefully to critique them or like pick them apart. I want to just have a good time. Usually the hype does not affect me in a negative way, and I don't think it did in this case either. But I was surprised that this was so hyped just because I had so many friends that only like romance books or only like thrillers that all gave this 5 stars. So I just was expecting it to be slightly different. I felt like this very much reads like a young adult novel, other than characters are slightly older in age, they cuss a lot, and there are like 2 spicy scenes. But otherwise, it really just reads like a young adult book to me. I felt like the language and things were very young. That doesn't bother me. I love young adult books. I was just surprised about how many of my friends that don't like young adult books that really enjoyed this. So just want to put that out there. I'm going to say something that might be a minor spoiler to some of you, but I don't think that it is a spoiler, so if you want to skip ahead like 5 seconds, you can. But I didn't love the talking dragons in here. And again, that might have been a problem with the audio. To me, it made it feel much younger. It just kind of took away from the fantasy element. I just don't feel like it was done the best, and I don't know if it was the writing or the audiobook, because I love Rebecca Solar, but I just didn't love that personally, so I didn't feel like connected to the dragons. I enjoyed the romance overall. Fairly predictable for the most part. Again, that doesn't really bother me. I expected, because so many of my friends that love smutty, spicy books loved this, that this was going to be much more spicy and smutty than it was, and really it only has like 1 or 2 scenes in it. Now, they do get very intense very quickly. To me, they felt like they kind of came out of nowhere a little bit, just because it was like not much spice and then just bam, and it was just like really fast paced. So I almost felt like this needed more spicy scenes in it to be like a true romantasy. And again, I'm not a big spicy smutty person, but that's just kind of how I felt. Things that I loved. I really enjoyed the world overall. I felt like it was very fun. I love school settings. I did like our main character. I do like the love interest. I thought the side characters were really lovable and fun. And I liked just kind of like the misadventures. So overall, I had a good time with it, but it was like a 3.75 4-star read for me. Sometimes with fantasy that will happen, and then I will give them a higher rating later on after I've kind of sat with them or reread them. So I do plan on rereading this. I cannot decide if I want to do the graphic audio or physically read it sometime this year before I do Iron Flame. I think I'm going to wait till the 3rd book is announced, because I will just forget so much by the time that one comes out that I want to read them a little closer to whenever the 3rd book is getting released. So I finally did it. I love that you guys are so invested and so excited. It's so fun to see the bookish community like all come together. I was surprised that this wasn't a 5-star for me just based on how many other people loved it, but I still did enjoy it. I'm a part of the dragon community. I think it's going to make an amazing movie. Next, I read One by One by Ruth Ware. This was my first Ruth Ware. This is an adult wintry thriller. Apparently, I am starting the year now with wintry thrillers, and I'm loving it. They're like fast-paced and keep me invested while I'm like turning my bookshelves back around and putting away Christmas. So I really, really enjoyed it. So this is my first Ruth Ware, and I'm always leery because I like thrillers, but I don't like ones that delve too much into the past of the characters and talk a lot about major traumatic life events, or if they're like very gory and intense. Like, for the most part, thrillers are not actually scary, they're just kind of suspenseful and you just kind of want to solve the mystery. So I'm kind of a little bit picky when it comes to that, so I have to read different ones to figure out how the authors are. I think Ruth Ware is going to be for me though. I absolutely loved the wintry vibes of this book. So this is set at a ski resort in France, and we have this tech company that has developed this very cool app where you can listen to music the same time as other people, including celebrities. So let's say I'm using like Spotify and I open up my Spotify and I put a song on, you would get a notification if you're following me that I am online and listening, and you could go and listen to the song the same time as me. And people loved it because if Lady Gaga was like on an airplane listening to a song, you could tune in and listen with her, and so it gave you like a connection, and it made you kind of wonder like why they were listening to that song. If they listened to like a bunch of sad songs in a row, you're like, are they going through a breakup? So it connects people together. This needs to be a thing. Like, it's a little invasive divisive, but I thought it was so cool. So I loved that. So this tech company that invented this app, I believe it's called Snoop, is going to this ski lodge to kind of have like a retreat and also to work some things out revolving around the app. And so you're following a bunch of different characters. That's one downside, I feel like, for some of you, is there are a lot of characters. And then we're following 2 characters that work at the ski resort, and everybody kind of has their own secrets and mysteries. I feel like this one had a really good pace to it. It wasn't like extremely fast paced, but it was a nice, decent pace, and I never felt like it was super slow. I do think the audio narrator was amazing, and that made a huge difference. The wintry setting of the ski resort and all of this is great. While they're at the ski resort, an avalanche hits, cuts off power, and somebody dies, and then things kind of go into chaos from there as they try to figure out what is happening. So I enjoyed this overall. I wouldn't say it was like the twistiest, turniest book ever, but I felt like the writing was good, the vibes were good, and I actually enjoyed the characters, like almost all of them. Even the morally gray ones, I felt like I was still connected to and really enjoyed. Sometimes with thrillers or murder mysteries, everyone is so unlikable because you want to suspect them all as the murderer that I didn't really care who was murdered or why, because I didn't like any of them. But I didn't feel like that was the case. So I will check out more from Ruth Ware. This was a 4-star for me, again, because of the enjoyment level and the good wintry vibes. All right, next we're going to talk about the graphic novels that I read, even though these are always 5 stars for me. So I read Space Boy Volume 16 and Volume 17. These are the newest releases in the Space Boy graphic novel series. I believe 18 is coming out in March, and I've talked about this series a ton because I've kept up with it. This originally started, I believe, as a webtoon. I absolutely loved it. It's so good. The main premise is we're following a girl who was like on a spaceship, and her family like worked on this spaceship, and they wound up having to get sent back to Earth after being there, and they get cryogenically frozen, and they go to Earth, and it takes 30 years. So by the time she gets there, everyone she knows on the spaceship is 30 years older. So like her best friend is like in her 40s, and she is very behind on technology and the trends and everything because it's been 30 years. So she's trying to make friends. She also has the ability to taste people. Whenever she's around someone, they kind of give a flavor to her, and she can kind of tell how they're feeling, and it's this really cool element. And then she meets a boy that has no flavor, and she doesn't know why. So that's a loose description. It's a really cool sci-fi. I am so in love with it, and I'm glad I got to these next 2. Then I reread Burning Midnight. I did this via audiobook because my friend Claire was reading it, and it was one of my favorite books last year, and I left it off of my favorites because at the time I gave it 4 stars, but honestly I kept thinking about this one and wanting to recommend it to people, and I really deeply regret not putting it in my top 10. So I might put it in my top 10 this year, even though I've read it last year, just to give it the love that it deserves. This is a YA sci-fi novel that is absolutely incredible and so much fun. So I did this one via audio. I did enjoy the narrator. I enjoyed physically reading it and audiobooking. So in this novel, we have this really cool trope that I absolutely love, and I need more book elements. In this world, we have these spheres that have just showed up on Earth, and they're all different colors, and they showed up all over the world, and different people are finding them in different places, and they have discovered that if you put them to your temples, it will give you some kind of ability. So like you'll be able to read faster, or you'll be able to go to sleep better, or heal quicker. So we have rated all of the spheres based on their colors and their value and how easy they are to find. This has just become a part of society. Nobody knows why they're there or what they're for. Some people are against them. Some people have started a religion around them. And our main character, Sully, works at a flea market where he sells spheres that he finds, or other people will bring them to him and he will sell them. He doesn't have a ton of money, and he doesn't find any of the good quality ones. And then one day this girl comes and brings him like a really rare sphere, and he is going to buy it from her, and then they wind up hunting for them together. You're following them. It's kind of like a treasure hunt while they're trying to like find these different spheres, and you're learning about them. For example, teal is rarity 1, is worth $60, and it will help you fall asleep easily. And then we have cranberry, which is a rarity 7, which is worth $550,000, and it will make you better looking. It is just so fun, and the ending is so wild and unexpected. It just keeps you on your toes. It's just a really, really, really good, fun time. This one kind of is reminiscent of Sleeping Giants and also An Absolutely Remarkable Thing. So if you guys know of any more books where objects or things randomly appear on Earth and we don't know why, send them my way because I love them apparently. It's like my favorite thing ever. So this was a 5-star upon rereading. And then lastly, and I don't own these somehow, I don't know how I don't own them yet, I reread Ballad of Never After so that I could finally get to A Curse for True Love. I did these via audio. Rebecca Solar's the narrator. Again, she's my favorite narrator. She's fabulous. This, of course, is a part of the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy, which is a spin-off trilogy of Caraval. I still highly recommend reading Caraval first because I absolutely adore Caraval. It's such a magical world, and there are kind of little Easter eggs that appear in this trilogy, so I feel like it's better to read the first ones first, even though there's only one character that crosses over. In these books, you're following Evangeline, and the love of her life is going to marry someone else, and she is very upset about it, so she makes a deal with a fate, and he stops the wedding, and then things go completely wild and awry from there, and we dive into this magical, fantastical, wonderful world, and I loved it so much. The romance in here is so good. These are YA, so they're very clean, but the romance is so romantic, so fun. I even love Stephanie Garber's bad guys. Like, they're such fun bad guys, and they're written so well, and you almost kind of like them even though they're doing terrible things. So it's just such a really, really fun series. I'm so glad I got to it. So book 2 is my favorite, and that one I gave 5 stars upon rereading. Book 3 I didn't love as much as I wanted. My issue with it is that I felt like the first half was so good and was exactly what I was expecting, and then the second half, so many things happened, and I feel like we got a lot of new characters or characters that we hadn't heard from in a little bit. We got a lot of their story. Honestly felt like it was a setup for another spinoff, which I suspect is going to come, but it felt a little bit like a different series in the last half. I still really liked the ending overall, and the whole series is excellent, but this one was a 4-star for me. Okay, you guys, that is everything that I read in January. Overall, I had a fantastic reading month in January. I was actually quite surprised that I was enjoying everything as much as I was. So hopefully we can keep this up as we continue on. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at The Bright Side Girl if you haven't already. Let me know if you've read any of these books down below in the comments, or what your favorite book of January was. And I will see you guys next time on The Bright Side.